the horror in the Middle East, an Israeli settler with a history of hating Palestinians walked past Israeli army guards into a mosque this morning where 800 Palestinians had just begun morning prayer. And he opened fire with an automatic weapon. A couple of minutes later, at least 48 Palestinian worshippers were dead. More than 150 lay wounded. The gunman, who moved to Israel from New York City 11 years ago, is also dead, having either shot himself or been killed by surviving Palestinians. This all took place 25 miles south of Jerusalem in the West Bank city of Hebron, at a particularly holy place for both Jews and Muslims, but where the Palestinian-Israeli relationship has been a bitter one for decades. Our first report on the massacre itself is from ABC's Dean Reynolds.
There was little, if anything, that could be done for many of the victims of the massacre.
They're killing our people. What they did to what we did to them? Just tell me what we did to them.
A gunman dressed as a soldier was shooting indiscriminately, witnesses said, methodically loading and reloading his Israeli Army Galil assault rifle, shooting children, men and women.
This lady's pregnant, she was pregnant, and she got a bullet in her back. Most of the patients, most of them, they got some bullets in their backs and their heads.
The shooting took place just before 6 a.m. at the Tomb of the Patriarchs in the West Bank city of Hebron. Said to be the grave of the prophet Abraham, the site is holy to both Jews and Muslims. This morning, 800 Muslim worshippers marking the holy month of Ramadan were packed inside. Hussein al-Jamal was one of them. People were running in all directions. Blood was everywhere, he said. People were swimming in their own blood. The victims were shot by a Jewish settler identified as 38-year-old Baruch Goldstein, seen here at a recent demonstration against Israel's agreement with the PLO. The army said Goldstein, an American immigrant, had acted alone. Palestinians argued that there must have been another gunman. The army said Goldstein was a suicide attacker. Palestinians said he was beaten to death by the people he was shooting at. Hebron, where the bloodshed took place, is right next door to Goldstein's home in the most militant settlement on the West Bank, Kiryat Arba. Today, some residents there were celebrating Goldstein's actions and praising his courage. It was a good deed, said this man. Proper vengeance for all the Jews killed by terrorists, said a neighbor. As word of the day's massacre spread, other parts of the West Bank erupted in demonstrations, which ultimately led to an increase in the number of Palestinian fatalities. Across the occupied territories today, Palestinians were confronting the army and asking who will protect them and why are Jewish extremists allowed to have and use guns. Those questions echoed through Jerusalem's Old City today as well. The plaza near the Wailing Wall was pelted with rocks during a clash with police, and the air was thick with tear gas. As thick as the emotions today outside one of the hospitals where the victims were being mourned, and where loud calls for vengeance were heard, demands that the peace process be halted, and threats against Palestinians who may still support it. Just the kind of reaction the man with the rifle may well have been hoping to provoke. Dean Reynolds, ABC News in the Israeli-occupied West Bank.
This is Richard Gisbert in Tel Aviv, where the Israeli Prime Minister called it a difficult day for supporters of the peace process, Jews and Arabs both.
A disgraceful, loathsome criminal act of murder was committed today. The government of Israel and the citizens of the State of Israel severely condemn this terrible murder of innocent people.
Rabin phoned PLO chairman Yasser Arafat to say that as an Israeli he was ashamed of the massacre. Arafat asked what kind of peace was possible if the killings do not stop. Within hours of the slaughter, Palestinian rage erupted at refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan. Palestinian support for the peace accord has eroded as deadlines pass, violence continues, and the two sides argue over what the deal means. Today, Palestinians demanded that Israel confront the military settlers who oppose the peace process and vow they'll never leave the occupied territories.
If they really care about the peace process, this is the real test. Are they willing to open up the whole file of settlements and settlers?
There were calls for Israel to disarm the settlers. Israeli opponents of the accord say that is no solution.
We've had dozens and dozens of Israelis murdered, slaughtered since the signing of the accord with the PLO, including by PLO factions. If these people are simply disarmed, you will see many, many more massacres.
In fact, since the accord was signed, many more Palestinians have been killed by Israelis than Israelis by Palestinians. It is a cycle of violence that now threatens to drown out the voices of moderation with the sound of gunfire and the inevitable calls for revenge. Richard Gisbert, ABC News, Tel Aviv.
The violence of Baruch Goldstein does not come as an enormous surprise to many Israelis. Americans of all persuasion go to live in Israel, but the more recent migrations have been dominated by those bound for the settlements and political extremism. Here's ABC's Aaron Brown.
Before he was Baruch Goldstein of Israel, he was Benji Goldstein of Bensonhurst, New York, the child of a teacher. Always religious, he attended the neighborhood Jewish elementary school and was an honors graduate of Yeshiva University in New York in 1977. His politics were shaped by the militant Rabbi Meir Kahane. He joined Kahane's political movement in New York.
He was a healthy Jew who understood that the Arabs living in Hebron and the Arabs living in Israel are active in a holy war against the Jewish people and interested in driving the Jews into the sea.
By 1981, he was a doctor at Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn and a political radical. In a 1981 letter to the New York Times, he wrote, "Israel must act decisively to remove the Arab minority from within its border." He would become a citizen of Israel a year later, a doctor in the Israeli army, a doctor who reportedly would not treat Arab wounded.
Dr. Goldstein did indeed immigrate to Kiryat Arba about 14 years ago.
It is one of the most militant settlements on the West Bank, and he was among its most militant members. In an interview with Israeli radio less than 3 months ago, he seemed to warn of today's attack.
With the help of the Almighty, we will found the state of Judah, and then we will know how to deal with them on our own.
Today, after the attack, Israeli militants hailed him as a hero, the son of Meir Kahane, calling him a Samson of his time. In the United States, the Jewish reaction is far different.
In the neighborhoods of New York, where the Judaism is often orthodox and the politics can be extreme, reaction to Goldstein was mixed. There was some anger, lots of understanding, and a little support.
9 out of 10 will condemn it and say that it's a terrible act of violence, it's an act of terrorism, and Jewish people are not terrorists.
For Jews, this is the holiday of Purim, a celebration of a great Jewish victory long ago. But this Purim in New York and wherever there are Jews, there is likely to be less talk of great biblical triumphs and more talk of great losses of the contemporary Middle East. More than 50 died today, including Baruch Goldstein. Aaron Brown, ABC News, New York.
President Clinton went on television this morning to condemn the massacre in Hebron and plead for a continuation of the Middle East peace process.
I am outraged and saddened that such a gross act of murder could be perpetrated. Extremists on both sides are determined to drag Arabs and Israelis back into the darkness of unending conflict and bloodshed.
Mr. Clinton said the Palestinian and Israeli negotiators agreed to come to Washington next week and stay in session until a peace agreement is reached. I hope, said Mr. Clinton, that today's tragic event can be turned into a catalyst for progress and reconciliation. And one more comment this evening from Hanan Ashrawi, talking to us from Jerusalem. She's a member of the original team which negotiated peace between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization. Mrs. Ashrawi, today we hear Palestinians in the West Bank calling for revenge. We also hear them demonstrating against Yasser Arafat as much as against Mr. Goldstein. Does that tell us more violence is just around the corner?
Well, there is a very distinct possibility because violence always generates more violence. But I don't think you can equate the demonstrations in which they criticize President Arafat's actions or positions with the demonstrations against such a horrendous act as the cold-blooded massacre of worshippers. I think they're seeing that this peace process has been used in a way as a cover to allow for the perpetration of such acts, and that it has not incorporated the basic issues which need to be discussed in order to put the peace process on the proper track.
In a phrase,
we all want peace.
Sorry, in a phrase, does this strengthen the hand, however, of those people against the peace process?
It certainly does. There has been a very persistent and gradual erosion of support, and now this kind of action sort of justifies people's worst fears and vindicates the position of the opposition. I think what we should do is to demonstrate that a genuine peace process can exist based on justice and on discussing the central issues.
Hanan Ashawi in Jerusalem, thank you very much. Sorry for the tone, you and everybody else. The news from the Olympics today is about the women's figure skating competition. It is finally over. That's in the rest of our broadcast. Also tonight, the Russians who were allegedly betrayed by the CIA agent Aldrich Ames and lost their lives as a result. And the U.S. government is considering a move which could severely damage the cigarette industry.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Aflac.
We met at the policeman's house in my hometown. We found out that we were expecting, and we kind of had an idea that there might be more than one. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks before the kids were born. And then Taylor and Tyler came along 8.5 weeks early. My Aflac representative was very, very friendly.
Aflac covers the unexpected costs of getting better, so you can get on with life.
Oh, you can't have it. Look at the monkey. Boop, boop.
How fast does Ambisol start to relieve toothache pain? Before you can say,
Ambisol.
Canker sore pain? Before you can say,
Ambisol.
relieve minor mouth pain on contact with Ambisol in regular or maximum strength.
Every time you have an awful cold, do you try a new cold remedy? Well, the search is over. Introducing Robitussin Liquid Gels. Powerful, non-drowsy relief for your cold.
Feeling better?
Yeah.
New Robitussin Liquid Gels. Finally, Robitussin relief for your cold.
At the Olympics today, the finals of the women's figure skating competition were certainly dramatic. Tonya Harding almost missed her chance to skate because something was wrong with her skate. Nancy Kerrigan did not win the gold. It was won by a young woman who also had a great deal to prove. Here's ABC's Dick Schaap.
When Nancy Kerrigan reached the skating rink early today, she hoped she was near the end of a 7-week journey from victim to victor.
Nancy Kerrigan.
Nancy Kerrigan.
So did her fans, who milled outside the arena tonight, side by side with ticket scalpers and seekers, juggling supply and demand as deftly as the Olympic rings.
Well, then I have one for $1,500 too, if you want it. That's what I said.
Take $1,200 for it. The drama was worth it. First, Tonya Harding, as usual, provided melodrama, reaching the ice late, then aborting her skate because
my lace broke on my boot, and we tried to put it back together, and the lace was too small, and it went out, and I just couldn't do it.
Given a second chance, Tonya turned her triple axel into a single axel and lost her last chance for a medal. She wound up 8th. Kerrigan, going second in the last group of skaters, started slowly with a double flip instead of a planned triple. But from then on, she skated without mistake.
Nice one.
Her performance lifting her into first place.
Very, very nice. A standing ovation, very good all the way around, and boy, isn't she happy.
The world champion skated next, Oksana Bayul of the Ukraine. And even though Bayul committed 2 small mistakes, she finished with a flourish, throwing in a pair of extra jumps.
They saw in her a suppleness, a litheness, a joy of skating.
Bayul burst into tears when she saw her technical marks, but they turned to tears of joy when she saw the marks for artistry. By a narrow margin, she moved past Kerrigan into the lead. Bayul was the Olympic champion. And Kerrigan was a winner, too. Her silver medal gave the U.S. 6 golds, 4 silvers, and 2 bronzes, matching its best Winter Olympics performance ever. Dick Schaap, ABC News, Hamar, Norway.
Now that the Olympics are over for her, Tonya Harding returns to Portland this weekend to the continuing investigation of her involvement, if any, in the attack on Nancy Kerrigan. Harding will undergo additional questioning by the FBI and local authorities. A grand jury is still weighing the evidence and is expected to issue its final report late next month. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrials lost about a point to close at 38.38. The trading was moderate. For the week, stocks lost 48 points. In our next segment, paying the price for being a double agent during the Cold War.
Dear Aquafresh, my teeth were so sensitive to cold and sweets.
Everything caused pain. Hot, cold, it was awful.
Aquafresh Sensitive targets the cause of the problem, soothing the nerve to help stop the pain.
No more pain.
You know, I don't even need a straw anymore.
No more pain. And great fresh taste.
And Aquafresh Sensitive has fluoride, so I don't need another toothpaste. Thank you.
Aquafresh Sensitive soothes the nerve, helps stop the pain.
When I was little, I was always getting caught with my hand in the cookie jar. And I still love sweet things, like Sunsweet pitted prunes. So you see, nothing's changed, except my cookie jar.
It was 1 a.m. I'm hurting, I can't sleep, and I'm worried about taking something. Is it okay? What am I gonna feel like in the morning? Finally, I take Tylenol PM. It stops my pain, it helps me sleep, and next morning, I am up with the sun and I feel great. Poor old Ralph can't even keep up. And I'm thinking, it's gonna be a beautiful day.
Rest easy, it's Tylenol PM.
Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Look to us for special delivery. Call us. We'll arrange to pick you up at your home, office, or repair shop. That's special delivery. That's Enterprise.
Teen drug use is on the rise again.
We'll show you what to watch out for, like the new drug of choice that's probably in your house already.
Schools where binge drinking is the hottest sport.
And dangerous steroids that can make good looks deadly.
2020, tonight.
In Washington today, the Clinton administration ordered a Russian diplomat to leave the country. He is said to have been the control officer for Aldrich Ames, the CIA agent who was accused of spying for the Soviet Union and then Russia over the past decade. Here's ABC's Britt Hugh.
At the Russian embassy this afternoon, it was like Cold War days, as the top Russian diplomat returned from the State Department, where he'd been told the U.S. is kicking the embassy's senior intelligence officer out of the country in response to the Ames spy case.
We asked that this individual leave the United States within 7 days.
It was a step the president and his Secretary of State had hoped they would not have to take, that the Russians would take for them. There had even been hopes for a Russian apology. But during a week when the Russian parliament pardoned the 1991 coup plotters and Boris Yeltsin found it necessary to make a tough-sounding speech about sticking up for Russian interests, Yeltsin, it seemed, was in no position to act apologetic about spying on the U.S. And trying to get him to do so opened Mr. Clinton up to criticism that his whole Russia policy is naive. He strongly disputed that today.
This is not black and white, this is gray. There will be developments over the course of our relationship with Russia where we won't like everything that happens. We should do things based on a clear-headed appreciation of what is in our national interest.
Mr. Clinton is in the same position as many a previous president, forced to defend a friendship with a foreign government that's acting none too friendly. Sometimes in foreign policy there are no better choices, but that doesn't make it easy to explain. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
Certainly in human terms, there is no more serious charge against the CIA agent, Aldrich Ames, than the fact that he caused Russians working for United States intelligence to be executed. ABC's David Ensor has discovered what happened to 2 Russians involved.
On November 7th, 1982, Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrinin and others were celebrating Soviet Revolution Day at the embassy in Washington. Major Sergei Motorin, a young KGB officer undercover as a diplomat, was with them. But 3 years later, when this picture was taken, Motorin had been recruited as a double agent for the United States. He was now working for the FBI, sending disinformation back to Moscow. This man was also a double agent, KGB Lieutenant Colonel Valery Martinov, officially a second secretary at the Soviet embassy in Washington. Then, in November 1985, came the bizarre case of Vitaly Yurchenko, the top KGB man who defected to America and then changed his mind. Lieutenant Colonel Martinov was ordered to escort Yurchenko on the plane back to Moscow. Once in Moscow, Martinov was arrested and taken to KGB headquarters. The same fate was in store for Sergei Motorin. He and his wife were on a Russian cruise ship when he too was arrested by the KGB. The current spokesman for the KGB's successor agency, the Russian Intelligence Service, says he attended Motorin's trial. He confessed, the spokesman says, and of course, they shot him.
And I'm sure those spies who were caught and sentenced in this country were most likely were the result of Mr. Ames' successful operations.
The 2 Russians knew the rules and the potential consequences of being double agents in the Cold War spy business, a business that continues in the post-Cold War world. David Ensor, ABC News, Moscow.
When we come back, uncovering a trade secret about the addictive nature of cigarettes.
I still remember getting my first candy from my grandfather. It was Werther's Original, and I was 4. I remember opening that golden wrapper and then that first taste. Sweet and creamy and just plain good. I felt I was really somebody special when Grandpa gave me his wonderful butter candy. Now I'm the grandfather.
And what else would I give my grandson but Werther's Original?
He's somebody special too.
This year, bring your income taxes to H&R Block and don't worry. We have more experienced tax preparers than anyone in the business. We'll prepare your taxes for a reasonable fee, thoroughly and accurately. We stand behind our work. And if there's an audit, we'll go with you. No charge. So it all boils down to one thing. You know you can trust H&R Block.
Everybody needs some money sometime. Everybody needs some cash somehow.
Hello?
Rita.
It's midnight.
I need $500. Now.
I'll call Western Union.
Just call 1-800-CALL-CASH, and you can send money from home.
My sometime is now.
Western Union.
Oh, yeah.
The fastest way to send money.
It's National Lobster Month, now at Red Lobster.
Crack it open, take a bite. Lobster lovers, tonight's your night. Fresh from Maine, rocktails too.
It's Lobster Month. Just 1 month to enjoy 7 great lobster dinners and tasty lobster appetizers, all at special prices.
Special time, special taste. If you're looking for lobster, this is the place.
Hurry to National Lobster Month, now at Red Lobster.
The U.S. government is considering a major frontal assault on the tobacco industry. The commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration said today that he is looking into whether cigarettes might be regulated as an addictive drug. Here's what's changed. There is now evidence that cigarette manufacturers carefully manipulate the nicotine content of their product to assure that each cigarette packs a certain punch. The evidence has been uncovered by John Martin, who's been investigating the story for the ABC News program Day One.
The investigation found that tobacco companies are adding to cigarettes waste products fortified with an extract that contains nicotine. As a result, the companies are able to manipulate the nicotine levels in cigarettes. The Surgeon General has determined that nicotine is a highly addictive drug. A former R.J. Reynolds manager, who requested anonymity, explained why the companies control the amount of nicotine in cigarettes.
They put nicotine in the form of tobacco extract into a product to keep the consumer happy.
They're fortifying the product with nicotine, is that correct?
The waste filler, yes, they are.
This long-held secret could subject the industry to federal regulation if it is determined that the nicotine is being added for the purpose of addicting smokers. The companies say nicotine is a natural part of the extract, used for flavoring, and is not intended to addict smokers.
It's a natural component of tobacco, and it's totally derived from tobacco. We are not in any way doing that.
Nevertheless, the FDA said today, evidence is accumulating that cigarette manufacturers may intend that their products contain nicotine to satisfy an addiction. John Martin, ABC News, New York.
There's going to be a good deal more about this Monday evening on the ABC News Magazine Day One, 8 p.m., 7 Central Time. A former official in the Department of Housing and Urban Development is going to go to prison for defrauding the government and for taking payoffs. Deborah Gordine, who served during the Reagan administration, was convicted of channeling millions of dollars in housing projects to politically connected Republicans. She was sentenced to 21 months in prison. We'll have a final note in just a moment.
You've waited for a Buick. You've waited for Buick quality at a low sticker price. You've waited for a car with Buick's reputation for safety. It seems you've waited for a century. Buick Century, with standard driver airbag, anti-lock brakes, power locks and windows, and more. All for $14,995. So don't wait any longer. See your Buick dealer today. This is the value of the century.
Day after day, you make those glasses of thick Metamucil disappear. Why not make them all disappear with FiberCon? Doctor-recommended FiberCon gives you the same fiber regularity in tablets.
Easy to swallow tablets.
Get doctor-recommended FiberCon.
I try to ignore my sensitive teeth, but hot and cold foods hurt.
That's why dentists recommend Sensodyne toothpaste to help stop pain and build protection against future pain every day.
Thanks, Sensodyne.
Trust Sensodyne, the dentist's recommendation for sensitive teeth.
With wrinkled brows, the old have seen deep sorrow, great joy. What does it mean? The touch, the feel, the fabric of our lives, the touch, the feel of cotton, the fabric of our lives.
Finally tonight, the massacre. There is a genuine sense of tragedy today among Palestinians and Israelis. There are others in the Middle East who think these are inevitable outbursts in a never-ending cycle of violence. And there are some who approve. Some Jewish settlers have already described the killer Baruch Goldstein as a martyr and a hero, sacrificing himself for a greater Israel. Similarly, this kind of violence contributes to the cause of Palestinians who believe that the struggle against Israelis can only be resolved by force. Hebron has been the scene of violent confrontation between Jews and Palestinians since long before Israel became a state. In 1929, 69 Jews were murdered there in a violent rampage by Palestinians. After the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, when Israelis conquered the West Bank of the Jordan, militant Jewish settlers, many of them from the U.S., moved into Hebron to stake a claim before settling elsewhere in the newly occupied territories. On the outskirts of Hebron, in the Jewish settlement of Kiryat Arba, where Baruch Goldstein lived, many Jews believe their government has betrayed them by making peace with the Palestine Liberation Organization. The real irony is this. The massacre today was carried out at a holy place which Jews and Muslims have shared, the tomb of the patriarchs, where Jewish and Muslim tradition has it that Abraham is buried. Put all these factors together, religion, the militant politics of American Jewish immigrants, and the hatred which the Israeli occupation has created, it is no wonder that otherwise hopeful people believe there will never be eternal peace in the Holy Land. And that is our report on World News Tonight. Later this evening, a special edition of 2020 on teens and drugs, and on Nightline, the massacre in Hebron. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
You made North and South one of the most popular miniseries.